Welcome everyone to another episode of Alumni Talk brought to you by the Alumni Basketball League. We'll be bringing you multiple college alumni games through the year of 2023. We'll be announcing Kansas versus Kansas State really soon. Make sure you follow ablballing.com, the website, at ablballing on Instagram, and at the ABL USA on Twitter. Also, this podcast is on YouTube as well as Apple Podcasts. Today we have guests, the new head coach of George Washington University, a good friend of mine, Chris Caputo. Glad to have you on, sir. Thank you for taking some time for us.
Thanks, Rick.
We're going to hop right into it. So, just talk about how you started out in basketball, your playing career, early days, and what got you to love the game.
Yeah, I grew up in New York City, Queens, in the 80s and 90s, and played high school basketball at Archbishop Malloy, which is for those of us in the DMV now, at the time that was like sort of the DeMatha of New York, or the Gonzaga High School of New York. Jack Curran, my high school coach, was legendary figures. His coach in New York State. He had coached Kenny Anderson, Kenny Smith, Kevin Joyce, who was the captain of the '72 Olympic team, amongst many others. And he was there a very long time until he passed away in 2013. And so for me, I was like, not a great player, Division III player, but I was very fortunate to have grown up in a great basketball environment that was New York City basketball at that time, and played Division III basketball at Westfield State College in Massachusetts. Got good experience there. Got familiar with what New England, the basketball scene there was, the prep schools and all that. And then because Coach Larinaga had also played at Malloy for Coach Curran, and that was sort of my connection, my way into Division I basketball. It was really my only connection and way into Division I basketball. And so I was fortunate enough to accept a volunteer position, no money, no nothing, to come to George Mason. And you don't know what you don't know. I just was happy to be, at the Division I level. And when you get there and you realize two things: one, three things. One, you're working for a great head coach. Two, a program that was having success at the time. I came in, I believe it was year 5 of 14 years that Coach L was there. And then three, coming in such an incredible basketball community that is the DMV and even up to Baltimore. And so, those relationships that I was able to build as a young person trying to figure it out were just, they're relationships I still have to this day, 20 years later. I don't think I'd be the coach at GW if I hadn't, taken the leap of faith to come down for $0 to George Mason. So I'm very happy about that.
So let me ask you. So when you were connected to Coach Larinaga, what was that first conversation like? Like what? How did he sell you? I mean, besides the fact you were willing to volunteer,
Right.
how
Well,
were you
make
able to
people
sell
that
you?
crazy, right? Well, I think he always tells a story. It's very fun. Like I'm playing in college, and there were a lot of like AAU, events, high school events in the New York, sort of New England area, and I would travel around, go stick my head at those events, like many, of us in the basketball world would do, and just try to meet as many people. I'd work camps. I'd worked Eastern Invitational at the time, which is the hoop group. And back then,
Back in the day,
back then
that was the camp.
that was the camp. That was
Mm-hmm.
that was the camp that a lot of guys. I got to meet a lot of coaches from the area. Glenn Ferrello, Keith Cottrell, Keith Adams, Josh Pratt, Mike Glick. Guys that were doing really good things in this area. And so when I got to visit with Coach L, I'm like, I'd love to get into coaching. Can I stay in touch with you? He was good enough to say, yeah, you can. He jokes that I emailed him every day. I don't know if I emailed him every day, but I certainly emailed him to stay in touch while I was in college. And then I always tell the story. I was back then, Ricky, not a lot of people had rooms, or if they did, they were those big, like, computers that broke all the time, those big, hard drive,
Mm-hmm.
never seemed to work, never seemed to be able to figure out how to print from them, and so I was in the computer lab, senior year of college, and I get an email from Coach Larinaga, and this is in the spring, kind of getting close up to graduation. He says, "Hey, I got a assistant coaching job open. I want you to apply for it." And I'm sitting there, 21 years old, thinking to myself, going to be 22. I'm like, hey, this is going to be easy, man. Like, I'm just going right from being a average Division III player to being the Division I assistant coach. And so I applied for the job, and then coach calls me and says, "Listen, you're not getting this job. Like, you're not qualified. You're not able to become a assistant coach at George Mason from being in college. But it's a state school, and I want the opportunity to interview you and basically potentially offer you a volunteer spot, where you can learn and help with camp and help with film exchange. And back then, you could actually be involved in terms of working camp. So I could still be on staff at George Mason, but work hoop group camp where guys like Fowler and Campbell and John were there, Will Thomas, guys that we wound up having at George Mason. And so I called my mom and dad and said, "Hey, I got a great opportunity. You're not going to believe this." And, "Oh, wow, that's awesome. How much does it pay?" "No, nothing. You're paying for this." And I didn't come from, we were middle class, but we were able to figure out a way to do it. And I lived in like 3 different places in 3 years, and one of them, a friend of mine owned a house that he was renovating, and so I was just basically like living in one of the rooms, and I'd be awoken by guys
Wait, so are
coming
you
in to
saying you
renovate the house.
volunteered are you saying you volunteered
Well,
for three
I did. I
years?
volunteered for the first year. The second year, I turned down a full-time assistant's job to stay for $500 a month, and then the third year, I turned down like a video job in the Big East for $1,000 a month to stay. That's how much I love the DMV. And then in the fourth year, I was elevated to assistant coach and made. At that time, I still think I might be the lowest paid assistant to ever coach in the Final Four in modern era, because I think we were making like $27,500 a year as the third assistant at George Mason. So I think the third assistant at George Mason makes more than that now.
So on that
Pretty sure.
staff was you, Scott Cherry, and who else?
James Johnson was there, who later became the head coach of Virginia Tech, and
So
for a moment.
the whole
Yeah,
staff became head coaches. That's amazing.
yeah. Well, and then Bill Courtney had just left.
Hmm.
Obviously, Bill had been the head coach of Cornell. Mike Gilliam was there my first year. He had been the head coach of Longwood. Eric Conkle was with us
Yes, he was. Eric Conklin, good guy.
before and then after, and Eric is now the head coach of Tulsa. Michael Huger came in after James Johnson. He's the head coach of Bowling Green. So we had a great run, a lot of good people in our time at George
So just to
Mason.
kind of talk about, because you got there in 2002, right?
Yeah,
So leading up to that Final Four team, like what
yeah,
was it that really got you? Because you guys did it with all DMV guys from the starters.
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
what was it like putting that roster together? And we actually had Tony following and Lamar on
yeah,
before. So what was it like putting that roster together? And like, when did you know
yeah.
this team could make a special run?
Yeah, so my first year, Jai was a freshman.
Freshman, I think.
Yeah, Jai was a freshman. So they had recruited him. He had played for Baltimore Select, and he had gone up to MCI. And back in that day, the Bowden brothers were running Baltimore Select. They're great guys. And I think Jai was, as like Rick, he was a little undersized, like
Mm-hmm.
guys, he just was like I guess back then a 5, but he was a very skillful 5-man. I always tell people, Jai was such a great athlete and such a smart athlete, like all state in football, basketball, and lacrosse, I believe. And I learned at a young age, like, he would come off the floor, even as a freshman, and be able to tell you exactly what was going on. You know, like what we needed to do, what he was seeing. He was just a very, very bright guy on the court. He really, really knew the game. Great competitor. So he was there as a freshman. I know Lamar was a big recruit for them. You know, he was like, you know, obviously Jason Muscuri was like, one of the first guys from Maryland. They got Rob Anderson from Northern Virginia prior to that, but like Lamar was kind of like the first really big PG County. He was a big recruit, you know, at that time at public schools in PG County at Oxon Hill, and so I think they thought that was a coup. He's a great shooter. He was very typical of guys from the area, especially back then, that were not going to leave. Right? They were like, "Hey, if I can go to Maryland, I'll go to Maryland. If I go to Georgetown, I'll go to Georgetown. If I can't go to any of those two, it's going to be GW or George Mason." You know, they're not going that far away. They really wanted to be connected to the community and their families, come to see them play, and so those guys were there. Tony's story is funny. You know, he goes out to Blinn Junior College. He comes back. He goes to Hagerstown. They go up there to see him play. Jason probably told Bill about him. I think Eric and Bill went up there and saw him, and they said, "Hey, you're pretty good. You want to like sit out too here this year? So we have you for 3 years." He was like, "Yes and yes," you know. So that was great that we had Tony for 3 years coming out of junior college. That he sat out that year and allowed you to get a guy for 3 years. And then, you know, Fowler and Will were John Vaughn was also in that class. And that was sort of my first class of being sort of involved in terms of, you know, they were like on the underclassmen list. I was calling around on them, calling their coaches. You know, I worked camp with Keith Cottrell and Keith Adams, their high school coaches. Got to see them at Eastern. They were at Eastern, of course, back then. I guess I don't know if it was recruiting or wasn't recruiting, but you know, if they needed like orange juice for breakfast at Eastern, like I was bringing them the orange juice. You know, I want to make sure that they were good. And so, you know, those guys I thought were really, really good recruits. In fact, you know, I think Fowler, I believe Georgetown took somebody.
Yeah,
like
me and Fowler was having that conversation.
It was Tyler.
Yeah, I know you're talking about.
Tyler Crawford. Yep. Tyler Crawford from Stanton, Virginia. Yeah, he was ahead of Farn on their list for whatever reason, but I think, you know, obviously it benefited us. And then John Vaughn, another, you know, kind of PG County guy that we thought was going to be a really good player. He was hurt on the Final Four team, but very good. Yeah, and then Will Thomas was such a warrior, still a great player even at this age. And Pat Clatchy from Mount St. Joe's, who's obviously had so many great players since then. We're talking to somebody about the other day. Will was really like one of the first ones, you know. And he was just a tad bit undersized, you know. So he was kind of in that A-10 colonial recruitment.
But Birdsong came from Mount Joe's as well, right?
Yes, Birdsong came a couple of years after that. Right. Yep. And we had Kevin Mickens actually in the program, who was from Mount St. Joe's and had gone to play for Bob Kirk up at Allegheny. Yeah. So, yeah, those guys were all from the area. They had a tremendous pride for, you know, being from the area, and you know, it was great to have those. You know, they embodied so much of what the area is about. Guys who love to compete. They're good people. They love basketball. They love to be in the gym. I learned a lot about what it should look like being around those guys. You know.
No, I mean that's it's just, I tell everybody else, like the mid-major model everybody else tried to build comes from what you guys did. And also you created the stress that these coaches are under, because now every mid-major coach is under pressure to get to the Final Four.
Thinks that they can do it.
It's just interesting. So just real quick, kind of like, what was that experience like being, you know, a mid-major in the Final Four? You took out UConn and one of my favorite college basketball games of all time to watch. Like, what was it like when you finally got there and it was like, okay, it's go time?
Well, I think, you know, the one thing I've said before is it was really a great moment for DC basketball. Is, you know, when you think about all the different moments, you know, whether it be Morgan Wooten or Coach Thompson or all the great players that have come through the area, you know, DeMatha Beaton, Power Memorial, Maryland winning the national championship, with Coach Williams, lefties teams, Len Bias, and obviously his success. When you think of all these moments throughout history, right? I think that moment, 5 guys from the state of Maryland in the starting lineup, go into the Elite Eight, played right in the heart of Washington, D.C., against a UConn team that obviously was number 1 in the country and the number 1 seed. And that arena, really, I think for George Mason, it's obvious. I mean, they still talk about it all the time, and as they should. Like, for the first time, a school that was considered to be sort of a commuter school that people, didn't really pay too much attention to in terms of the pride of the school. You thought of it as a means to an end in terms of it being a commuter school. To now, there's 20,000 people inside of Cap One Arena in the middle of the district, and they're all George Mason fans. It was a great moment for the area, a great moment obviously for the school, and one that we always say, everyone that came after us, whether it be VCU or Butler or Old Dominion, Loyola Chicago, Wichita State, all those people went into the locker room in that Elite Eight game knowing that it could be done, because that group of guys did it. Whereas we didn't really have that frame of reference. We were the first, it's pretty powerful when you think about it that way.
No question. I mean, you do that, then you guys take the Miami. I mean, you made about 2 more trips to the tournament, or was it 1 more trip to the tournament? Then you guys.
In my years, we made 2. We went back and we lost in the championship game in 2007. Went back in 2008, lost to Notre Dame, and then went back and lost in the championship in 2009. And then
back in 11,
went back in 11, and Cam Long and Luke Hancock and Ryan Pearson and those guys, and we beat. That team didn't have quite as many guys from the area. Cam Long, obviously, Luke Hancock being from Roanoke, but we beat Villanova in the first round in that year. So that was a great year too.
So we see, you guys now on a high major level, and you're taking the Miami job, which at that time. It's, Miami is known for football, and it's still known for football. So, I mean, you move from George Mason, Fairfax, Virginia, to Coral Gables.
Coral Gables.
Just talk about that transition and how you guys were able to build that program up.
Yeah, I think we were very fortunate. I give Coach L a lot of credit. When you think about somebody who had been very, very successful in this area. This is a great place to live, as you know, a great community. He was, here's a guy who was Washingtonian of the Year. He was on the cover of the Washingtonian magazine. He was very well recognizable, very well connected in this area. His son lived here. For him to take a leap of faith at 60 years old to go try on what people, I think, would have thought was a very difficult task at Miami. I give him a lot of credit for betting on himself, and we inherited a good team in terms of not on the court basketball success, but the pieces were sort of there to potentially elevate that group of guys. And then we got very lucky and got Shane Larkin that summer. We had recruited Shane Larkin at George Mason, and he chose DePaul. Wanted to play at the highest level, but had grown up in Orlando. And that summer, he didn't have, for whatever reason, just wasn't having a great experience even in the summer at DePaul, and felt like I'd like to get back home. And we just happened to have the scholarship, happened to be there. It was literally the day before school started. He came. Donna Shalala, our president, she was instrumental in making sure, hey, we can get a guy in school here the day before school starts. And she made that happen. And, the rest is history. We've got a team full of pretty good players that are trying to, hey, can we figure out how to elevate ourselves to being a postseason team, an NCAA tournament type team? And we actually turned that into being, in the second year, the ACC champions, both in the regular season and the tournament, make the Sweet 16. So that that got us off to a good start. And then, we were able to then go to another Sweet 16, another Elite Eight, a couple other NCAA tournaments, NIT championship game. We did it with Ricky. Probably we were a little bit ahead of the time on the transfers.
That's how we got to know each other. I mean, you
Yeah.
guys really were. I mean, I remember you recruited Marquise Reed from me. You recruited Corey Holden
Yeah,
from me.
we probably messed that one up on Marquise
Oh
Reed. We
man,
probably should take
ACC Kim became the
it.
ACC great player, and it's so
Yeah,
interesting, man. Because I consider myself lucky because about 90% of my transfers made all league in their next league, whether they went up or
yeah, it's
down,
incredible.
and that's hard
Yeah,
to really when you think about now with the volume of transfers to imagine guys that went from mid majors. You're talking about the Robert Moores, the Delaware, all these places to being all conference on a higher level. Um,
yeah.
it's tough. But so, as you're there in Miami, I know you've been an assistant coach for a long time. It's 20 years. Um, talk about your interest in the GW job and how that kind of came to fruition.
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously, my respect for the GW program, Coach Jarvis, Coach Penders, Coach Hobbs, the success that Mike Lonergan had by winning the NIT and taking them back to the NCAA tournament. You're aware that GW is a place where you can have success.
Mm-hmm.
It's obviously a name brand institution, one of the great academic schools in the country, in really an incredible location. Probably the best city campus in America, I would say. And, a place that's had success. The Smith Center is a cool arena. The president at GW prior to now had been at Miami and had some familiarity with me. I was involved in the job the first time around. And, quite honestly, I mean, my not being a head coach probably kept me from that. I mean, it felt like maybe they wanted somebody with head coaching experience, which is, understandable. And, but this time around, for whatever reason, that administration is gone, but they came back to me, which I was actually a little surprised, but happy that they did. And, hopefully I made a good enough impression the first time around. And, I think it's a very good fit for me, having been in the area, but also been at a private school like Miami that's similar in some ways as GW in terms of academically and things like that. So I knew the success that was possible. Obviously, I knew how great the area is. Now, the world has changed, Rick, as you know. Like, I think the days of somebody having, 5 guys from the state of Maryland, and those guys are all high school recruits, and they never left, and they just stayed, and they all got to, they did that as a group together. And I don't know. I don't know if we're going to be in that era ever again. But the reality is you're going to be able to attract them from the area out of high school, and also guys who are going to transfer up and down depending on their situation. And we should be a good place for all those people to look at.
I got 2 more questions left for you before we go.
No worries. Yeah.
Number one is it's hard to get coach interviews during the season, so this is really good.
Yeah.
So how has it been your experience in the first? I think you guys are 20 games in.
Yeah, about 20 games.
So what has that been, and what do you see going forward for the rest of this year?
Yeah, I mean, we're 5-4 in the league. I think we're in 6th place. If we would have won last night, we'd been in 3rd, which we were picked 12th, so that's probably doing okay there. I'm encouraged. Really, one of the things encouraging. One, I inherited a very good group of guys. The James Bishops, the Ricky Lindos, the Brendan Adams, Hunter Deans, Kwanzaa Samuels, Noel Brown, Amir Harris. A lot of local guys. They're great people. We were able to bring Max Edwards along with us. He came from Kansas State. He's from Connecticut. He's having an all-rookie level season. He's really, been encouraging there. And I think the combination of my good fortune of having good dudes in the program, allowing us to sort of try to establish, a culture and environment, has been good. And then what I've really been impressed by is our student support. The interest from the students at GW. Yeah, I mean, we beat South Carolina with about 1,500 students in the building, and as you know, it's a great 5,000 seat arena that when you have that type of student sport, it gets very, very
Very
loud.
loud.
And so, yeah, I just think it's a place where, with some work, we might be able to create one of the better environments, really, in the Atlantic 10 because of the size of the building and the quality of the building.
So my last question that I ask all my guests it's a tough question, right? It's puts you on the
Yeah, it's
spot,
okay.
and it makes people talk about it. Who are the 5 most talented players you've coached? And I like this question because
Coach.
it makes people it gets people saying, "Wait, I want to hear if my name's going to be said." I get it all the time. But who
Oh
are the
man,
5
yeah,
most
guys.
talented players you have coached in your coaching career?
All right. Well, I think Shane Larkin, Lonnie Walker, Bruce Brown jump out at the first 3. They've probably made the most money, so that's easy. So the guys that are mad at me, they can say, I can just say that these guys made more money than you. So you don't have to be mad. But no, I obviously Lonnie Walker, one and done, tremendous gifts. Guy's having a great year this year. I think he's really starting to come into his own. His combination of size and skill, like just from a 6'5", 6'6"
Athleticism. I
guy,
remember seeing it.
so athletic, so
Yeah.
strong, and then a good shooter. Shane Larkin's speed, like he was the fastest guy in the NBA on the tracking data, right? I'm going to say Bruce Brown's to play hard for like against the best players over and over and over again. There's other guys. I mean, Will Thomas is a guy whose talent, like when you say talented, like if you're defining like toughness as a talent and like just competitive nature, like Will Thomas is right there, man. There's a reason why guys like 37 years old playing in the EuroLeague.
Still is definitely playing.
He's just such a great competitor, right? The guy that jumps out. If 5 is the number, right? So it's hard. Like, we had Sheldon McClellan who played, for the Wizards for a moment. Sheldon Mack, incredible talent. He got almost 2,000 points in the Big 12 and the ACC on 9 shots a game. So you think about somebody's scoring ability,
So
his ability to put the ball in the basket.
5.
Yeah,
Nope.
I would say those guys.
Else.
Yep, can't go anymore.
Can't
go anymore.
Let's see what your Mason guys got to say about that. Let's see what some of your Miami guys got to say. It's all fun, man.
Yeah,
it's crazy. But I appreciate you coming on, my guy. Me and you stay in contact.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate your support for me.
Yep.
I'm always going to support you.
I bet you're going to get a good crowd. I heard you said Kansas State and Kansas. You're going to get
That's
a good
crowd.
That's going to be a good
one. We're looking at Kentucky, Louisville, looking at North Carolina, Duke. So we're still putting some of the logistics together, but confirmed will be Kansas State, and Georgetown, Syracuse. We know those are going to happen.
Where will Georgetown?
It'll be most likely in Syracuse, just because we that's they love.
They'll get them out. They'll bring them out.
So thanks, Coach.
Will it be in the dome? Or
that's the thing. We're working on the facility. Once we announce the facility, then we'll release that. I'm thinking it's going to be where they have the TBT, but we'll see how it goes. It's going to be a big game though, for sure.
Yeah, it's fun.
Cool.
It's fun. Well, I appreciate what you do.
Appreciate you, my guy. Also,
thank you.
Thanks guys for joining us. This has been Alumni Talk. Make sure you check out Apple Podcasts for us, or YouTube, and also follow ablballing.com for more information. Thank you guys. Appreciate having us. Thanks, Coach, and we are out.
Thanks. We'll see you. See you, man. Good seeing you.